seeing the same people over and over again that can afford to pay it, that are in the club, I just don't think is doing a service to our industry. And it's also not helping to promote, in my opinion, innovation, because some of the most innovative companies exist don't have the largest budgets. So it's definitely a problem in our industry, the pay-to-play problem.
I am so excited about today's episode, but before we get to that, I've got to go to our Ask Ken question. The question that came in here, somewhat broad this time around, and it is, how do I know if my DSO is ready for private equity interest? This is an interesting question. There are obviously some significant ranges here to talk about, but let me just give you a couple things to think about. Before we talk about how much revenue and all of those different things, the most important thing you need here to drive valuation are systems and processes, and you need people who are going to stay to continue to run those processes and systems, because that private equity group does not know how to run the business. And in fact, a private equity term that's very popular and common is that the operators of the business know where the quote unquote bodies are buried. And they want that experience and they want that to stay inside the organization as much as possible. Now, if a few people need to exit or those sorts of things, that stuff gets worked out. So that's the first one. The second one is, if you're not at 10 million in annual revenue, probably not time. Probably need to be surpassing that number. The other one is, you have got to have the financial statements cleaned up. And I always talk about this when you're going through a process, you have to have a highlight reel. Just like a football player who's trying to get drafted or anything else, you have to have that highlight reel. And with the highlight reel, what that does is that captures their attention. It doesn't solve all the problems, but it captures the attention. They want to see that things are working and doing well financially. So if you're not on accrual, if your books are a mess, those are things you want to tighten up and clean up, because otherwise you will be penalized significantly. You'll be punished from a valuation perspective. So definitely want you to be thinking about that. You've got to invest in the financial infrastructure, the financial frameworks is what we call that at Accrued Ent. And then the last part is that concept of management depth. You've got to have some depth there, because private equity people are smart, but they don't generally know how to run dental groups and dental practices. And so they are going to be looking to you and to your team, to the systems and processes you've built. All right, that's enough for the Ask Ken question. I am really excited about our episode. We have Matt McGaw here with us. And by the way, do you prefer Matthew? I've just always called you Matt.
Matt works,
Okay.
man. Yeah.
So Matt's with us. Matt, if you'll take a minute, just introduce yourself and talk about what the dental truth is that you want to talk about today.
Yeah, sure. I think, I'm the founder of DSO Compass. It's been an 11-month project for me. Really, it's a whole career, right? We all work towards different things, but been in the dental landscape since 2008. And I do a lot of writing. I have an email newsletter that drops twice a month, and then an email newsletter once a month, and LinkedIn newsletter twice a month. And a lot of that lately has been around looking at the market as a whole, specifically around conferences. And I don't know the specific truth behind it, but I think they seem to be a bit broken, at least in the DSO landscape, really across the board. When you start to think about all the conferences that have existed over the years in our careers, just dental conferences as a whole, they seem to be a bit broken, and there's consistent themes across the board that I'm seeing that I'd like to talk through with you, and maybe some solutions and some things that I've seen be successful and the reasons behind it. So that's the general dental truth that I think we could chat about today.
This is awesome. It's such an amazing topic because it's a mess. And the thing is I hear people that go to conferences, the same conferences, they say that was the best one ever. And then other people say that was horrible. And so you've got obviously this disparity, but you also, I don't know, there's this proliferation of the big groups are doing their own internal conferences now, right? Where they're celebrating and driving culture. So you have all of that that's happening. And then you have vendors that are starting to pile on to those types of things, as well as some of your small one-off. And then you have sort of the granddaddy of them all, which is Dykema, that at least that's what everybody talks about and what you hear about, generally speaking. So yeah, I'd love to hear you kind of unpack this. I think the listeners will really get a lot of value out of this. Let's do it.
Yeah, I think when I started to think about this over the last year, because I haven't worked directly for somebody, right? This has been my own thing. And I think you could probably speak from experience and others that are listening that have an entrepreneurship mindset and have gone on their own and started their own business. When you look at things differently and you're not under the lens of the company that's like funding you and paying your way, I think you're able to see things from a much more, 30,000 foot view and with a microscope on it. And when I started to think about it, when you think about conferences, when I started in 2008 in dental, like it was basically like Yankee Dental, Midwinter, Greater New York, some of the regional conferences like Hinman, CDA North, CDA South, right? Some of the
Yeah.
private practice related events. Not until Brian came into the play with Dykema and then ADSO did we have like DSO group type conferences, right? And that is shifting. And I think you look at some of the original conferences, like I'll just use Yankee Dental and Midwinter. I think they're still doing relatively well because they're starting to incorporate like multi-site to it. They're
That's right.
starting to incorporate like having a Kaleo go speak there at different events. Like the ones that are still flourishing on the private practice side are kind of specialized or they're starting to incorporate some of the DSO and multi-site. When the DSO conferences started to emerge, it really was just Dykema, ADSO, and then some of the others that came into the play. And I think everybody wanted to go to those. This was maybe pre 2020. And I don't think attendance was an issue. It's like everybody wanted to learn and understand what's going on in the DSO world because we're starting to see growth. So I don't think these folks that started these conferences like 10 years ago had to do a whole heck of a lot to differentiate themselves. They just got tickets sold because it was about a DSO and everybody needed to attend. And post 2020, and all this is just theory, like, right? This is just my opinion. Post 2020, things changed for a lot of us due to the pandemic and how conferences went. Nobody could go, everything was virtual. So then people decided inside themselves, like, where am I going to spend my time? Like, where are things valuable? And I think a lot of those decisions around like the places that they went, especially around DSO conferences, are going to be based upon connection, relationships, the content that was there, who was attending, who was speaking. And it's more difficult in this day and age to get people to come to these conferences because, like you said, there's user meetings for the actual DSOs themselves. Some of the vendors are having conferences. There's smaller, more intimate events. There's the larger ones. So where am I going to spend my time? Where am I going to spend my focus? And that's the shift that I've seen. I'm happy to go deeper inside some of this too, but I'm curious, like your thoughts, if you thought about it that way, kind of where things were like 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and how the shift has happened.
Yeah. And alongside of all of that, we have this one thing called consolidation that everybody's thinking about and worrying about and trying to figure out and wanting to make sure they're going to get their piece of the pie and everything else. And I think that all of that is kind of mixed up in with these conferences because what I hear a lot of people saying is, I'm going to the conference because my clients are there, or I'm going to the conference because I guess at this point in time, I don't know that people go to the conferences for the learning as much anymore, as much as the connection and the opportunity to sort of renew connections, make new ones, and those kinds of things. I don't know. What is your
Yeah,
thoughts on that,
well,
Matt?
I think that's accurate, and I validated it. So I've got the email newsletter I have has over 3,000 folks that subscribe to it, and I sent out a survey specifically
Mm,
around conferences, and only middle of the pack came back and said that they came out of those conferences with like a key learning. Most of the individuals want to go to conferences because they want to have connection. So it's almost like connection over content. So the thought of having a community, you look at different conferences like the recent Dykema one that I went to. It was a smaller event, only about 100 people were there, and there were consistent folks that were there from the previous event. So it's not necessarily just about the content, but it's about seeing the people that are in the same fight that they're in, having conversations about challenges they're up against, having conversations about successes, just talking about their personal lives, what they're up to. I think like a story led conference versus sponsor led is something that I'm seeing, and then couple that with, like, a membership and a community type thing. Look at the local thing that we did here in Utah, right? And
Yeah.
there was like 40 people that ended up running through, and we didn't necessarily have like a topic. Some people said to me like, "Hey man, you should like have a topic, talk about AI or something." I'm like, "Well, I feel like we're a little fatigued maybe on talking about AI." I just wanted to get everybody in the same room just to hang out and try and help each other out. So it's almost like some of that is shifting to more about community versus even the content. I think the content is important. You need to make sure that you have content that people wanna learn about, but even more so, I feel like in this day and age, it's about, like, hanging out and being together. I think the last thing I'll say too is this business specifically, like, I had a at Dykema, I had a founder of a startup come up to me and say, "Is this, like, the last remaining relationship-driven vertical there is?" Because it is, right? It's so true.
Interesting. That's fascinating. So, one thing I want to ask you about that has always kind of baffled my mind is when I go to the conferences and I look at who's on stage, sometimes I really scratch my head. And I know that that's becoming more and more of a pay to play. And again, this is in the context of where we should be focused on building relationships and trying to help each other. I'm just curious, what do you think about stage time at some of these events and the value or the lack of value, just depending on your perspective?
Same survey I asked, and the survey, just to let you know, it's not just vendors. There's a lot of DSO executives, private practice owners, individuals that are wanting to see the people talk on stage. Who they don't want to hear from it are the vendors. Like that was like last on the list. So like CEOs of companies, business development VPs of different vendors are like last on the list. They want to hear from industry colleagues and leaders. They don't want to hear from the vendors. But to your point, it has been a pay to play world, and I think that's a problem. I understand it. It's like a chicken and the egg, though, Ken. Like to build these conferences, you have to have revenue in order to make them good. And to get revenue, you're going to get it from the sponsors. And in some cases, the people that everyone wants to hear from aren't going to provide the money to be on stage. Now, I feel like there's got to be a give somewhere.
Right.
I've never run a large conference. I probably best person to talk to is like Laura, right? And that runs Dykema's events and everything. There's some others that are out there, but there's got to be a give because just seeing the same people over and over again that can afford to pay it that are in the club, I just don't think is doing a service to our industry. And it's also not helping to promote, in my opinion, innovation because some of the most innovative companies exist don't have the largest budgets. So it's definitely a problem in our industry, the pay to play problem.
Well, and the time that I spent in the DEO gave me a little bit of exposure to kind of some of the risks around holding events and everything that goes into it. And a lot of times these large hotels or these large conference gathering places, they force your hand to like buy multiple years ahead of time when who knows what's going to be happening 5, 10 years from now, but they force your hand to have to make that investment. And then the prices just keep going up every year. And that starts to put a lot of pressure on whoever it is that's trying to run the conference and trying to do it in a way that's, meaningful. And I think for the most part, a lot of the conference organizers that I've talked to, they all seem, very keen on trying to bring the best value possible. They're not necessarily trying to make millions and millions of dollars on it. They're just trying to bring value to people who are showing up net. And it's, I don't know, that part of it is kind of tough. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I agree. Yeah, I'm a little, originally from Western New York, a little more cynical than you are. I think there's a lot of financially driven folks that are running some of these that, uh, well, from what I'm seeing, are starting to become exposed because when you're financially driven and you're promising things just to make money and the outcome doesn't happen at the conference, that next year is not gonna be very successful. Yeah, I don't really wanna make any ill will here, but there's a couple that I went to this year that will not be on my calendar for next year based upon like what I feel like are individuals that are not putting forth the right amount of effort, build something interesting, something impactful that works for both the attendees, like the DSOs and the executives, private equity, whoever is there, and also the vendors. I think there's a world where you can really please both, but you just have to be intentional about it. And you can't expect like the old ways of doing it before 2022, 21, 20, 2019 to work in this day and age. And I don't know if you've seen this too, man, but like it's like a trash conference and you're there, you're attending it, and you see people doing social media posts about how great it is, what an amazing turnout it was. I'm looking over at these people at this one conference. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like, there's like 16 people here. Like, and you're posting like it's the most amazing conference in the world. It's like, this doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem genuine, authentic, and from the right place.
Yeah. I went to a conference recently and it was so painful. Huge room where, all the speakers and everything are going to be, and I'd say most of the time, and there was seating for, I don't know, possibly 1,000 people in this room. Maybe it was between 500 and 1,000, something like that. And at some points in time at that main stage area, there were maybe like 6 people in the room. There were almost more people on stage talking than there were people in the audience listening. It
Yeah.
was so painful, so painful.
My guess is that whoever is behind it, if I'm behind that, I put together an event and people flew in, they spent money at hotel, airline, probably money for, a booth, stage time. And if it was that, I would have gone around and individually talked to each one of those and expressed my sincere apologies for the turnout. It wasn't what I expected. At least try and schedule some time with those individuals after, like the speakers, the vendors, whoever it is, and say, listen, I promise this is going to be better next year. We're going to come back full force, like own it. And in most cases, what I feel is not happening is that true owning it. And I think that would speak volumes as well. And I think ultimately that stuff gets around a business. And the ones that will win this next year are going to be the ones that drive content for sure, the ones that create community, the ones that are honest and upfront about what it's going to be. And I think a lot of that too, I'm seeing a trend towards like a hybrid format too, to where it's like, it's not super long, except Greater New York. I don't think they'll ever change like that. That is the most ridiculous. Have you been to that meeting?
I've been just once.
Yeah. It's like,
That's the operative word there, once.
why are we still here on Tuesday and Wednesday? Like I remember going to that meeting. It's right after Thanksgiving anyway,
Yeah.
but I think shorter bursts and attach the event with something fun, like something that not just a reception, like that everybody does the first night, reception, drinks, a party, whatever, but attach like an event to it, something interesting. I'm actually thinking about doing one. I don't know if I'm going to do it this year coming up, Ken, but I'd love your input too, is like doing something around skiing here, right? Like going up to PC Powder Cats or something and like having 2 of the cats and then having kind of an exclusive event. I think an event with good content for about a full day and then a really fun event attached to it is a trend that I'm seeing too.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Did you watch or have a pulse at all on, it's a brand new conference. They were basically taking the old Dental Forum format, and I just forgot the name. He'll
Model
be
together, I think.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, I didn't attend this
Any
year.
thoughts, or did you hear anything about?
Yeah, I heard from both sides. I heard from the vendor side. I also heard from the DSO side. And from the vendor side, I heard very, very positive things because they got to speak to, actual DSO executives. I did hear also that like if somebody was in marketing and they spoke to somebody in finance, like it's why did I pay for that? Like I don't like it's great that I'm meeting somebody, but we don't have much to talk about. So from the vendor side, it was mostly encouraging. On the DSO side, they felt a little forced into having conversations with maybe vendors that they don't have relationships with or don't want to have relationships with or don't have like a need inside their business, like a genuine need. So I think it was a little bit of a mixed review. I also did hear that the format of it, like giving a certain amount of dollars to a DSO for some of their executives to go, there was a lot of individuals that were in the position to make a decision on a technology that didn't go. And they just had kind of middle management, like regionals go versus the VPs and the directors and the C suite.
So the more decision makers, yeah.
Exactly. So I'd be curious to get a poll of all the vendors that went to that conference and what their conversion rate was, by February of next year. Like, did they actually have conversations that converted to a business relationship or not? Or did they just have, more work to do, more emails to send, right? That would be, I like the approach. I do like the approach. And I heard they did a pretty good job of getting individuals and leaders to attend. So I just think there were some little things to clean up. And I did hear too that they're asking for a ton of money next year. So you mentioned the DEO. I remember when the DEO was hot off the presses years ago.
Yeah.
It was like the place to be. And then I think they got a little big and a little cocky, and they started asking for a ton more money, and they started sticking the vendors not necessarily like near where all the individuals that were buying were. And I think they got a little cocky, and I think they went through a phase where they didn't do as well, and now I think they're back to doing relatively well. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want, just because you had a pretty good year doesn't mean you should all of a sudden increase your fees from 5,000 to 20. So yeah,
Yeah, that
that's all.
definitely could be problematic. Interesting. All right. So as we kind of start thinking about wrapping up the episode, Matt, because we could go on this forever, what are some of the key takeaways you think we should be thinking about and looking out for?
As far as what, conferences or just in general?
Conferences. Yep.
Key takeaways are, I think, look at your schedule beginning of the year. I think Dykema is going to be a staple. Everybody should go to that, but there's a handful throughout the year that I think are interesting, and go to ones that not only have good content, but you can also engage within a community, within a membership. I think that's going to be important moving forward. Find the ones that are embracing fun along with the time and learning would be my areas to focus on. If you're getting a sense and you're making a decision about whether you're going to sponsor one of these events or be an attendee, you'll find out right away, what their level of like authenticity is, and what the real meaning behind, what they're trying to accomplish with the conference. I feel like you can do a pretty good judge of that. Just because they had an event last year and the year before doesn't necessarily mean you should go out there, in my
Right.
opinion. So,
Yeah. Great point.
I am optimistic. Like, I think there's some cool stuff, like JW with that Destination DSO. Like, he's got
Yeah.
cool stuff. Like, I think that's going to be really fun next year. He's got some fun events planned. So just the consistent, this is how we used to do it. I think there's a lot of options out there besides that. Like, CareStack has a user meeting. Planet DDS has a user meeting. Some of those are going to be pretty interesting to go to as well.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, I do have one final question here for you. What do you think about the dental boards, and the kind of the state events that they do, the statewide events that they do, like the one in Anaheim, the CDA, that's a very popular one. What do you think about those conferences that are put on by the regulators?
I haven't been to CDA in a couple of years, but the times that I've been there, it seemed to really embrace the California community. So CDA North, CDA South, it was always a relatively successful event for the different companies that I worked with in the past. So I
Mhm.
think there's a regional aspect to it, and not everybody's a DSO, right? Like, there's private practice owners that need to understand what technology exists and what's out there. So I think there's a handful of those throughout the United States, like CDA, ADA, AAO, and AMIS are still, I would think, the ones to go to for their specific specialties. So
Right.
I'm bullish on the ones that are done by ADA, AAO, AMIS, because there are a lot of private practice owners that do a lot of great service for their patients that need to have the right technology and need to get their CE credits and take care of their teams. Yeah, it's a whole different world.
Yeah, I'm glad we just kind of are wrapping up on that, because I think it's important. And like you said, the same state connections, and there's a lot more opportunity in some ways as a result of just the geography concentration.
Definitely.
All right. Well, that is going to be it for today's episode of Dental Truth Project. Thanks again to Matt McGaw for being here and sharing these great insights. And it does feel like we're just scratching the surface, so there's a lot more to discuss over time. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And I'm Ken Kaufman, and until next time, keep seeking the truth that helps dentistry thrive. Happy day.